Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this podcast. My name is Dr. Irvin Scott, and I'd like to welcome you to Office Hours with Doc. Over the past 30 years, I, like many before me and many after, have devoted my life to America's children and its communities by working within the education ecosystem. In other words, I'm an educator. I've been a teacher. I've been a principal. I've been a district leader. I've been a nonprofit director. I've been a foundation executive. But so many before me have done those jobs, and so many people are doing those jobs, and so many people will do those jobs in the future. However, what we want to do in this podcast is look at individuals and listen to those individuals who are doing those jobs right now in order to do three things. One, we want to hear their stories, understand how they got to where they are, and what they're doing while they're there on behalf of America's children. And let's go beyond America, the world's children, because we have international perspectives that we'll be sharing. So that's the first thing. Number two, we want to better understand how these educators work within the ecosystem, not only as individual actors, because sometimes you have to do that, but more importantly, as team members to have impact. And then number three, speaking of impact, our goal is to hear how we might all work to accelerate our collective effort and impact going forward. These are the voices from the ecosystem that we'll hear in this podcast. If you've ever wondered what's going on in schools or school systems or school districts or however you think about schools in the US and the world and the lives of those individuals who are shaping children's lives, if you've ever wondered that, this is the podcast for you. Office Hours with Doc. Welcome.
I am so excited. Welcome everyone to Office Hours with Doc, voices from the education ecosystem. And the voice that we are hearing today is coming all the way from Australia, New Zealand. Which one?
Yes. Australia, Melbourne.
Melbourne, Australia. So excited to have my colleague, currently a student in the online education leadership program here at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and also someone doing work on the ground in the pre-K-12 education ecosystem, none other than Jennifer Ma. It is so great to have you, Jennifer. I am super excited to have this conversation. And as you know, those of you who have been listening to us, our goal is to have conversations with individuals who are doing work in the pre-K-12 education ecosystem in particular. So we focus mostly on elementary, pre-K, elementary, secondary education, although over time I hope to expand this to higher ed also. Individuals doing work in nonprofit spaces, doing work in schools, doing work in sort of the intersection of business and education, and those doing work in foundations, all throughout the education ecosystem, which you can learn more about by going to the Advanced Leadership Initiative, looking up Pre-K-12 Education Ecosystem by Dr. Irvin Scott. And so we're here to hear from individuals like Jennifer. The wonderful thing about Jennifer is she's doing that work in the pre-K-12 education ecosystem international. And so in a second, she's going to talk to you a little bit about her work, where she's doing it in particular, internationally. And I'm just really excited to have her. So welcome, Jennifer. It's been I talked for a long time. I should have said welcome. Good to see you.
We love it. We love hearing you talk, Dr. Scott. Kia ora, hello, ni hao. Hi, everyone. My name is Jin Ma, and I am the founder and CEO of Little Oasis, which is a early childhood and family space and center based all around China.
Awesome. It is exciting to have you. Okay, so you're a founder, you're a CEO, you're focused on children, Tell us a little bit about how you, elementary school, I think in particular, that's your focus.
Nursery,
Nursery.
nurseries,
Oh,
birth, birth to six.
birth to six.
Yes,
Fascinating. That's
yes,
what we
because
would
in
call
China, you don't start primary school until you're 7. So it's 0 to 6,
0 to 6. Okay.
pre-K.
We would call that pre-K. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit how you got to where you are in the work. Did you all of a sudden become a CEO? I'm assuming there's an evolution and a founder and an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit your story, Jennifer.
Yeah. I mean, I wish it was a simple story, but I became a mother. So my background is actually in marketing and branding way back. I became a mother 13 years ago, so young mother. And it was the hardest thing that I ever encountered at that point. And it threw me into a little bit of an existential crisis of self. And I found it not only hard to care for a baby that no one teaches you how to be a mom. Like I had no skills and I went to school all these years. I was very far from my family. I was living in London at the time. And I became really interested in early childhood education. I became really interested in parenting. I became really interested in just figuring out, how do you raise a child? It was really difficult. Added to that, I think there's a whole invisible layer back then that wasn't very well communicated, which was when a woman becomes a mother, not only does she have to care for the child, but fundamentally her whole identity changes. Her body changes. I stopped working to care for the child, so my professional identity changed. My relationship with my husband changed.
Mm.
Added that, you've got the grandparents dynamic. All the while I'm trying to figure out how to care for this child, I'm trying to figure out who I am in this new identity. So I think it was that journey of figuring, when I then moved to China back in 2012, I quickly realized there was nothing there. I felt very isolated. I was very lonely, had no community. I didn't know where to find other mothers that we could just hang out and chat and kind of talk through our anxieties. I grew up in New Zealand, so I had this idea of what a great play-based education would be like. There was nothing in China back then that was similar to that. So I actually never set out to become an entrepreneur. Wasn't like, oh, I want to start a business. It wasn't. I was really just looking for my community.
Mm.
And I started in my living room. I started in my living room hosting other mothers around my apartment that wanted to come and hang out, do play dates. So we don't have churches, we don't have community centers in China. So there's no local place. And Beijing is a city of 20 million people. How do you find, it was very difficult. So I started in my living room hosting mothers and their babies. We would have discussions. I would then try to find like programming online or somebody that could do a little session for us. It started organically like that. And I started thinking over time, I got to stop doing this in my apartment. It was getting very crowded. More people wanted to come and just talk to other mothers and share our journey together and have the kids play. So the children would be between 7 months to 3 or 4 years old, right? Somewhere to play. China's climate is also very extreme, so very hot and very cold. The children cannot be outside all the time. So you really need indoor spaces that are children friendly. Quickly over time, I realized, wait, there's actually a need here for a community space. So I think within kind of 6 months to a year of moving to China, I started thinking about a project that was community and family based. I did not know where to start, where to look. I wrote a business plan that went nowhere because I didn't know who to talk to. But what I did do was I was very close to my customers. I was very close to the mothers. I was very close to the families. I could talk to them all the time about, well, if we had a space like this, what would you want? How would you want to interact in it? So effectively, I did 3 years of research before in 2014, 15, I thought I had my second child. There was still nothing out there. And I thought, I got to do this. I just got to do this. I was turning 30 that year. And paralleling this, I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find a job because I've never worked in China and I've been a full-time mom for 4 years. So I just thought, I'm going to do it. I'm like universe, help me, help me. And it happened. So we just moved one step at a time. We met some really great people who supported us. So in China, you cannot have a private nonprofit. So it was I guess it was a for-profit education organization. And we called it Little Oasis. So a piece of oasis for the families. And our vision is to really nurture the well-being of families. We had the space designed in such, it was the first early childhood space in China that was designed for families. It wasn't just a playground for kids. It was actually, we really thought about what would it look and feel like for parents to feel very comfortable in there, for them want to hang out in there. What does it look like if it is totally safe and the kids are playing and they can see their child, places for social interaction. So Little Oasis was founded in 2015. Then I went through the entrepreneurship journey. We started with 10 staff, one location. It grew to, by 2021, we have 15 locations across 11 cities. So the staff, we increased that to about 200 staff over time. And then COVID hit us, right? So in some ways, I've been through that almost the whole cycle of entrepreneurship where you start from an idea, you kind of figure out what you're doing, you scale that, you grow from a founder to a CEO, and from a CEO to someone that really has to let go as well, because it was kind of my club, and kind of transitioning myself out of that role. And then going through COVID, which was effectively 2 to 3 years of crisis management. Yeah, that's my story.
Wow. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions. How am I going to do this in the next 18, 20 minutes? It's going to be a challenge. That is an amazing story. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of things that I want you to respond to relatively quickly because you've given me, this is very rich. The first one is identity crisis. Would you describe what you were experiencing as a result of becoming a new mother, stepping away from the professional work and just being new? Would you describe it as an identity crisis? And now that you look back on it, what was the motivators that enabled you to turn that identity crisis into something positive? Okay, so real quick.
I think it was a Rumi quote that says, when there's a crack, that's where the light comes through. Something along those lines, that quote, that beautiful quote. Sorry, I'm butchering it. Identity crisis. I stopped. I think in our modern world, so much of our education and who we are is based around our work, especially me having gone through higher ed, having worked in a professional space. So much of who I was as a person was rooted in my value to society. And when you stop having that, and if you are in this new role, unable to form a new anchor to who you are and what your value is, because the truth is with domestic, even though we know raising children is fundamentally the most important thing in the world, it's unpaid, it's not appreciated. I mean, if I write on my CV, 4 years full-time mom, I could not get a job. So that was the identity of what is my value? What is, like, I felt lonely. I didn't know who I was in a way when I was a mother. I knew I was a mother. I knew in my heart I was more, but no one around me could tell me could help me with that journey. And sorry, I lost your other question.
Yeah. What prompted you to turn it around? If someone was, because there might be listeners who are like, I'm in an identity crisis right now. She just described my identity crisis. I may not be a mother, I may not be a father, I may be something about something else. What was it that triggered you to think differently and more positively and to build from it?
I think it was almost, I think it's faith and hope and this knowing that even though I am lost, I will turn this confusion, this pain into something good. I think it is really important. Doesn't matter where you are and what circumstances you might be facing in this current moment, believing and knowing that this is for a purpose. You know, it's such a cliche, everything happens for a reason. So something is happening to us. We have we can choose to respond and look at it with, that's it. That's it. What am I supposed to do? I'm just a mom. Or we can say, this is the challenge I'm facing, and this is my hero's journey. And through this, I will find something. This is life, right? I think the older I get, the more I realize this is life. Life is full, life is full of challenges, and that is how we grow and learn. And that is what makes life so meaningful and purposeful and beautiful and rich.
That's
I think that journey taught me that.
That's beautiful. Faith and hope is what I'm taking away from what you just shared. Of course, I wrote this book that's coming out in April, Leading with Heart and Soul, and it just so reminded me of, you used the word anchor, a new anchor you talked about. That's beautiful. And I think that's what needs to be heard in this moment on so many different levels. Okay, I got to talk more sort of business oriented. Did you have a lot of fun? Did you have a lot of capital? Like people might be asking,
Yeah.
how did you get this off the ground?
Yeah. So we borrowed some money from, it was like effectively a loan from friends and families, that they got equity as well, but it was in a way, it was like a contingent contract. If we do well, this can be turned into equity because then you'll be making money. If this doesn't do well, it's a loan and we'll pay you back. But what happened, so the first location was funded like that. Obviously, we had some of our own savings. So that was 2015. By 2017, we had a venture capitalist, or I would say more of a family office that invested in education and along the ecosystem, actually. They were looking at the education ecosystem and figuring out where the right kind of portfolios would be to create synergies. So 2017, we had our first kind of pre-A round of funding. So that was a whole interesting journey by itself. I probably pitched to over 30 to 40 investors, and changing their role from founder and educator to asking and for funding. It was a kind of a completely whole different vernacular, learning what they cared about. And so that was a learning curve by itself, but we found a really values aligned. I think that's really important when you get funding. Yes, there's some money and you need the money to grow. However, it is, who is that money coming from, and what impact do they want to make? Where's their heart? How do they think about education? So we got very lucky. 2017 was actually a good year for funding in general. So we had that, and then we started bringing in, after that, as we scaled across China, and China's massive, we started looking then for partners in different states, right? Different locations, different regions. And they also then became a partner in the local head company. And that's how we kind of started to grow and started to create synergies across different regions. And over time, we managed to get people who were values aligned, who really cared about education and committed to doing work in the space, but also were financially able to support the course. Yeah. It's almost like you have to go out there and draw in the right people.
Yeah, but it sounded like the original funding came from family and friends who made it.
Yes.
Who made an
investment. Yes, they're the only one that believed in us.
Yeah. It often happens that way. I should have asked this early. How many kids did you serve? How many students or children are you serving, or is the organization serving? Because if I'm not mistaken, this organizations you've sold, this corporation you've sold, or you still just remind us of that business arrangement.
Yeah, so this corporation, early last year, we have sold another pack of our shares to one of our other partners, who is based in China and kind of wants to grow it in a new way. So I'm now a director, but I still help the organization with the education component as a founder director now. Yeah.
Gotcha. And how many children are being served by this corporation?
Yeah. So we looked at those numbers. Obviously, during COVID, it went down a lot because we had closed. It's probably 20,000 a year, more or less. So that's over 10 years. That's a lot.
Wow. That is a lot. 20,000 annually or
Yep.
20,000 over that
No,
10-year period.
annually.
Okay, so tell me what this look if someone's listening, they're like, what does this look like? Is this a daycare? Is this like a
No, no.
child center?
I had
What is it
photos.
actually?
Yeah, so I guess if you think of, okay, when I started this project, I really didn't want to see what was out there and just say, oh, the nursery, how could, it was starting from square one, first principles, and saying, okay, what do young children need? What sort of
Mhm.
spaces do they need? What sort of spaces do adults need? And the brief I gave was, well, if a family got stranded on an island, on a little oasis, what will it have? So a playground, right? Always play spaces. It will
Mm.
have a space for adults to chill, meet each other, have coffee, a cafe. It will have spaces for purpose-built early childhood enrichments like art and music, little nooks.
Mm.
It will be a community space. It will have a library. So we started with these ideas. I then emailed, I think, over 20 different kids museums across the US, because I knew there was something about the build of children's museums that was so geared towards this sense of discovery and exploration. I emailed lots of nurseries in New Zealand. I ended up getting an expert to help me. I talked to a lot of Montessori principals, Reggio experts. So there was building this process. I did a lot of research around early childhood spaces. So if you would imagine a beautiful first-class lounge at the airport or something very chic, but then that whole space is geared towards the safety and exploration of young children. So so our central space, I call it the living room. It's actually what we call it in our clubs. The idea was, well, if you went to like somebody's house and they had this beautiful big mansion and it was all built because they had young children, what would it look like? So very homey in a way. We used we make sure we used the color palettes that you can find in nature. So lots of wood, lots of greens, lots of blues, lots of whites, lots of natural materials, just to create that sense of calm and space. We always look for locations. So our locations are between 500 to 2,000 square meters. So really big spaces.
Oh,
Playground, in playground, library, cafe, lots of different rooms that may look like kind of a childhood Montessori or Reggio center, a kind of an open space in the middle. I have to give you some pictures sometime.
Yeah, we got to do picture at some point in
Beautiful.
time. How many of these exist in China? These spaces?
15.
15. Okay. And at one time, how many children are in it?
Oh, with one location, any one time,
Yeah,
probably it could be 50. It could
50.
be,
Wow,
yeah, it could
fascinating.
be 70. It really depends on, because the locations are all purpose built at different. So the
Wow.
2,000, as you can imagine, bigger, weekends, busier. We have lots of babies that come through Monday to Fridays with their mums or nannies or grandparents. Yeah, it's
That's
really beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah.
How familiar are you with the US? Like, just remind me, you've been here a lot. Because what I'm wondering is there anything comparable in the US to what you're describing right now?
I think there are places where it's nothing of scale and nothing that's, because it sits kind of slightly on the peripheral of the education ecosystem, right? When we think of pre-K, we don't think family hangout
Yeah,
space. We
fair
think
enough.
nursery. We think, in New Zealand, we have something called Plunket, which is where mums and babies go for their checkups. We have community groups in churches and community centers, mummy and baby groups. So we have these different things. I do think there are places in the US where it's geared towards bringing young children in as a family. So Mummy and Me music, Mummy and Me yoga, like kind of these programming, but nothing that, oh, actually, no. Back in the days, there was something called Gymboree. I don't know
Yeah,
if you,
I remember. I
yeah,
remember when my
yeah,
kids were younger. Yeah.
that's right. So in some ways, Gymboree is that kind of indoor play, because it is
Yeah.
very important for young children to be physical and for adults to figure out, well, at this age, what do we do with them? Like that was
Yeah.
actually when I started becoming so interested, because I
Yeah.
started taking kids to all these places to figure out, how do I play? I mean, you can only do peekaboo so many times before you and him get tired of it. I didn't know how to play with babies. Oh, So I started
the other,
learning. Yeah.
right. Well, the other thing that it sounds like exists in your model is not just, physical play. You've got
No.
arts, you got
Yes.
music, you got different museum. I don't think
Yes.
about Jamboree. I don't think about a museum when I think about Jamboree or
No.
these
So
places I've taken my kids, which are
no.
all about running around
That's
and getting.
right. So it was very innovative. And the main thing is we actually use the New Zealand early childhood curriculum, which is called the Te Whāriki, and which is a Maori word for the mat. So they talk about these strands and principles that become interwoven as like a mat for the child to stand on. Things like empowerment, community, relationships, holistic development. So we use those principles and strands in the very early days to then build our center. Even in the space design, we talked about, well, what would a space interior design look like if it empowers children? Right? Like, so things are different. So we used a different vernacular in our design. So it was kind of bridging children design with early child education, with business, with hospitality, which made it really interesting and complex to run, actually.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm looking at our time. This has been amazing. I think I'm going to have you come back again. And one of the things we're going to do is hopefully look at some, at least for the podcast viewers, some pictures so they can get a sense of this. Because
Yes.
one of the things that fascinates me is why isn't something like this in the US, Jennifer? And so I want to plant the seed for that. Okay, I know some of my listeners, and this is a question I would ask. When I hear you describe this, I wonder who can afford this. I wonder,
Mm.
is this
Yeah.
an upper echelon sort of service
Mm.
where in order for you to have your children here, um, you have to be upper middle class. Is that the case or is that not the case?
I think in the beginning, it was not so much upper middle class. It was, I mean, you could frame it like that. We framed it as parents who wanted access to an alternative way of bringing up their children. Because
Mhm.
at the time that I was building this, everything else in China, early childhood related, was focused on these very structured classes. Gym classes, but they were very structured. And with children, you need unstructured play. So parents, so I would say middle and upper class for sure. Over time, we actually built a little sister brand called Little Oasis Playroom, which was a lower, more affordable, smaller spaces version of the club version. But that's one part of being in China. There are no nonprofits unless you are
I
government.
thought that
So
I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So are
yeah, you
you
got
a
to.
government organization then? Are you part of the
No,
government?
no, you can't. You actually can't be unless, I mean, it's a whole thing. It's a whole different
You're not
ballgame.
but you are a for-profit. You're a
We are
corporation.
for-profit, so we're
Okay.
not government related. We are for-profit. We ended up working on a few projects with government. So, talking about your class with the PK-12 ecosystem, it was really interesting because prior to that, I had been running my business for 8 years. I never thought about it as an ecosystem. However, once I took your class and I looked at what I was doing and I looked at the impact, I realized we've been in this ecosystem the whole time.
Wow.
We've put ourselves at kind of way outside, but actually, depending how we frame it, we're right in the middle, right? Because we have access to parents and children when they're babies, before the parents access nursery, before they access anything. So we ended up working with the China Development Fund, which funds the free lunches, which do like rural migrant children education. We worked a lot with museums in the last few years, where we started, because with museums in the US, often you have these public service for children-based programming, weekend activities, all free. They don't really have the capacity in China to do that. And because our team, we specialize in early childhood programming, we ended up working with a few really big modern museums that, and we created kind of their weekend programming or special exhibitions, and we would run those events. And that was really a way of giving back because it was a nonprofit endeavor. Late in 2021, we also created a returnship for mothers. So it kind of goes back to my story, not being able
A
to find a job.
returnship.
Yeah. So
What
internship.
internship?
So yeah.
Gotcha.
So with mothers who's been out of work for a while in China, it's incredibly hard to find a job. population is so big, there's so many grads, it's very difficult for them. And mostly because they have a blank on their CV. So we started, because we have our own spaces, we started giving women a 6 months returnship where they can go into these roles that are more flexible, with the hope that after that, they will at least have some skills on their CV and kind of re-enter. It's really about building confidence. So we did that. We started getting other companies or small, medium enterprises to kind of join the crusade in providing women the chance to go back to work. So,
and that is directly connected to what drove you to move down this road in the first place, right? That confidence.
I quickly realized that my heart was really in, the motto for my high school was buy, love, serve. And like, I don't want to admit it, but actually I feel like that is the best way I know how to live. So that's why by 2023, I realized I wanted to know better, learn better. Harvard has been exposing me to all these new ideas. So I stepped down as the CEO, became a director, and really looking at how I can do bigger social impact work.
That's beautiful. Real quick, what's the difference between CEO and director?
CEO is in charge of the day-to-day running. Director, you are a little bit less day-to-day, more high-level, more strategy.
Strategic vision. Gotcha. Jennifer, this has been absolutely amazing. I know you're a mother also of 3 boys, which I also have. Mine are men and they have kids of their own. But just a minute or so on how you balance that really important calling with being an entrepreneur, a director, a wife, and everything.
Yeah, I think firstly, it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise a child. So my village is my husband, my parents, my friends. I also tell people, I did not have 3 boys and run this business all in one night. It happened over a decade. This is something we have to realize. Often we look to these other people like, like yourself, wow, Dr. Scott, he's amazing. He's doing all this stuff. But you didn't become Dr. Scott and have all this wisdom and knowledge overnight. It is a daily practice of learning how to adapt, how to grow. I feel like as leaders, we have incredible range in the way we operate. So I'm very good at multitasking. I think all mothers are. And just growing day by day and figuring out where your energy is. Like I get up very early to do work, and then before my kids start, wake up, and then the kids. So I block out the day. I mean, there's no secret. It's just hustle. And just enjoying your kids, right? I mean, sorry, you probably see them like kind of trying to come in and they can't help it. I told them not to come in.
I thought that was so beautiful and so like apropos when you were saying something, it was actually about hope and love and spirit and faith, and the door began to open at the same time. But I couldn't see anybody. I was like, that's her son. He is probably really low, so we can't see him.
Yes, they crawled back. Opened. They were crawling behind me. I think
that is absolutely beautiful. Jennifer, it's been a joy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on finishing up in a few months the online education leadership program at Harvard Graduate School of Education. Thank you for being a wonderful student and doing the work on the ground as you learn it through our program. It's been a joy to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott.